In November 2023, Markayla Johnson's family drove from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, to Charlotte, North Carolina. They had a specific purpose. They were going to get her out. According to search warrant documents later made public by the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, family members traveled to an apartment on Orchard Trace Lane and retrieved Markayla and both of her children. The documents state plainly what they found when they arrived. Markayla was reported to have been high on narcotics when she was picked up, while still in care of her 2 young children. Her family did not hesitate. They brought her and 4-year-old Miracle and their infant son home to Myrtle Beach. For a few weeks it worked. She was home. She was with people who loved her, away from the man she had met online and moved across 2 states to be with. And then sometime around the 3rd week of January 2024, Markayla Johnson left Myrtle Beach again. She took both of her children with her. She went back to Charlotte. She went back to the apartment on Orchard Trace Lane. She went back to Benjamin Taylor. By the 3rd week of February, her family started noticing something different in her text messages. Shorter, no emojis, no FaceTime calls, which had always been part of how she communicated with the people who loved her. Her sister Tabby Holiday would later describe it simply. It was different. It was out of character for her. On March 3, 2024, family members filed a missing persons report. Markayla's phone had gone dark in the area of that same apartment complex and had not been turned back on since. 12 days later, Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police executed a search warrant at 405 Orchard Trace Lane. What they found inside that apartment, and what they found the following day inside a car parked at that same complex, would become one of the most devastating triple homicide investigations in recent North Carolina history. Welcome to the Crime Files TV. This channel covers the stories from Black American communities that deserve to be told completely, with the victims at the center, and the full weight of the evidence treated with the respect it demands. This is the story of a family who saw the danger clearly enough to drive across state lines and pull their daughter out of it once, and what happened when she went back. This is the full story of Markayla, Miracle, and Markayla Johnson. Markayla Johnson was 22 years old. She was from Summerton, South Carolina, a small town in Clarendon County where her family's roots run deep enough that when the time came to lay her to rest, the community gathered at Scotts Branch High School in numbers that filled the building. She was a mother of 2. Her daughter Miracle was 4 years old. Her son Messiah was 7 months old. Her own mother described her in the simplest and most complete language available to anyone trying to capture who a person actually was. She said Markayla was a good person. She said everybody knows Markayla would do anything for you. She said she did not deserve this. Markayla had moved from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina to Charlotte in the fall of 2023. According to court documents, she made that move specifically to be with a man she had met online, Benjamin Joseph Taylor. He was 34 years old. He lived in an apartment on Orchard Trace Lane in Northeast Charlotte. He was not the father of either of Markayla's children. The relationship between them developed in the way that relationships increasingly develop in the contemporary era, through digital connection before physical proximity, through the specific kind of online intimacy that can feel deep and real before 2 people have spent meaningful time together in person, and that can sometimes obscure warning signs that would be far more visible across an in-person courtship. What Markayla's family did not know in the earliest stages of that relationship, what would only become public knowledge after her death, was the documented criminal history that Benjamin Taylor carried. According to the North Carolina Department of Adult Correction, his record dated back to 2007, felony breaking and entering in Cabarrus County, assault on an officer in Mecklenburg County in 2011, another assault charge in 2016, possession of a firearm by a felon in 2018, drug-related convictions in Forsyth County, and beyond what the Department of Corrections records confirmed. Additional public records cited by reporters revealed dozens of prior run-ins with police, including previous charges of kidnapping, assault, and violating a domestic protective order. At the time Markayla was living with him, he also had a pending case in Mecklenburg County for possession of a firearm by a felon and a felony drug charge. This was not a man with a clean record who made one terrible decision. This was a man with a documented history, spanning nearly 2 decades, of violence, weapons offenses, and at least one prior violation of a domestic protective order, meaning that at some point before he ever met Markayla Johnson, A court had already determined he posed enough of a threat to another person that a legal order was put in place to keep him away from them, and he had violated it anyway. Markayla moved into his life carrying none of that knowledge readily available to her. And by November 2023, her family had seen enough, through whatever contact and communication they maintained with her during those early months, to know that something was deeply wrong. They drove from Myrtle Beach to Charlotte. They went to the apartment on Orchard Trace Lane. They found her, according to the search warrant documents, high on narcotics while caring for her 2 young children. They took her and both children home. This detail deserves to be sat with carefully, because it represents one of the rare and specific moments in any case this channel has covered, where a family did exactly what advocates and crisis intervention specialists describe as the ideal response to a loved one in danger. They did not wait for a phone call asking for help. They did not assume the situation would resolve itself. They traveled across state lines, physically removed her and her children from what they correctly identified as a dangerous environment, and brought them home to safety. That is not a passive or symbolic gesture. That is intervention in its most direct and effective form. It worked for a period of weeks. She was with her family, away from Benjamin Taylor, away from the apartment on Orchard Trace Lane, away from whatever combination of substance use and relationship dynamics had produced the crisis that brought her family to Charlotte in the first place. And then, around the 3rd week of January 2024, she left again. She took Miracle and Messiah with her. She went back to Charlotte. She went back to Benjamin Taylor. This is the moment that the title of this video centers, and it is the moment that deserves the most careful and honest examination of any single fact in this entire case. Because the instinct when hearing that someone returned to a dangerous situation after being rescued from it once is to ask why. Why would she go back? What does that decision say about her judgment, her awareness, her priorities as a mother? Those questions asked in that frame miss almost everything that the research on intimate partner relationships involving substance use and coercive control actually tells us about why people return to dangerous partners even after a successful intervention. The presence of narcotics in the situation that her family discovered in November 2023 adds a specific and well-documented layer of complexity to any analysis of why Markayla returned. Substance use disorders are not simply choices that a person makes and unmakes based on willpower or family intervention. They involve physiological dependency, psychological patterns, and in many cases, a relationship dynamic in which the substance use itself becomes entangled with the partner who provides access to it, creating a form of dependency that operates on multiple levels simultaneously. If Benjamin Taylor was part of how Markayla was accessing narcotics, then the pull to return to him was not simply an emotional or romantic pull. It was potentially a pull shaped by addiction itself, which research consistently shows can override even a person's full awareness that a situation is dangerous, and even their love for their own children. This is not a judgment of Markayla Johnson. It is the opposite. It is an attempt to understand with the honesty that her memory deserves why a mother who loved her children completely, who her own mother said would do anything for you, ended up back in an apartment with a man who had a documented history of violence stretching back nearly 2 decades. It was, in all likelihood, the specific and devastating product of a substance use crisis that her family's one intervention, as courageous and correct as it was, could not fully resolve on its own. Addiction recovery, the research consistently shows, often requires sustained, professional, and multi-layered intervention. A single rescue, however loving and however necessary, is frequently not sufficient to break a pattern that substance dependency has created. Markayla returned to Charlotte with both of her children in the 3rd week of January 2024, and from that point forward, the documented record of what her family experienced becomes a slow and agonizing accumulation of small, specific signals that something was wrong, signals that arrived without the clarity that hindsight now provides them. Around the 3rd week of February, the text started feeling different. Tabby Holiday described it specifically to reporters after everything had been discovered. She said it was something short, instead of having an emoji attached to it, and not FaceTiming anybody. She said it was different and out of character for her. Those details, the absence of emojis, the absence of FaceTime calls, are the kind of granular, intimate knowledge that only people who communicate with someone constantly would notice. A stranger reading those texts would see nothing unusual. A sister who had exchanged thousands of messages with Markayla over years, who knew her specific communication patterns and personality as expressed through a phone screen, noticed immediately that something had changed. What the family came to believe, and what they told police directly during the missing persons investigation, was that Benjamin Taylor might have been using Markayla's phone to communicate with them, creating the impression that she was fine when she was not. The texts that felt wrong, that lacked her usual warmth and personality, may not have been written by Markayla Johnson at all. On March 3, 2024, at approximately 5 p.m., family members filed a missing persons report with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. According to the search warrant later made public, Markayla's cell phone was turned off that same day in the area of the apartment complex on Orchard Trace Lane and was never turned back on. Family members went by the apartment on March 5th. CMPD's Missing Persons Unit requested the public's assistance on March 8th, publicizing the case and asking anyone with information about Markayla, Miracle, and Markayla Johnson to come forward. The investigation moved forward across the following days. On March 6th, detectives located video surveillance showing Benjamin Taylor fleeing North Carolina on a passenger bus. He had left the state by ground transportation in the days surrounding the family's missing persons report. On March 15th, 12 days after Markayla was reported missing, detectives obtained and executed a search warrant at the apartment on Orchard Trace Lane. What they found inside that home is documented in the search warrant affidavit, and this channel will state it with the clinical restraint this material requires. Markayla Johnson's body was located inside the apartment, in a closet in a plastic storage container. Multiple used air fresheners and candles were found in the space. Several fans had been left running, and the air conditioning unit had been set to approximately 62 degrees. The following day, March 16th, detectives searched a vehicle that Taylor had been operating, which had been towed from the apartment complex. Inside the trunk, they found the bodies of 4-year-old Miracle Johnson and 7-month-old Markayla Johnson, each inside a separate gym bag. Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Chief Johnny Jennings addressed the press in the aftermath of these discoveries with words that did not attempt to soften what his department had found. He said it was difficult for him as a police chief. He said nothing is worse than the homicides of small children and family members. The same day detectives were searching that vehicle in Charlotte, law enforcement officers nearly 2,000 miles away, in Imperial County, California, located Benjamin Taylor. He had traveled to an area near the Mexico border, known locally as Slab City, a region described by journalists who cover it regularly as remote, largely lawless, and home to people who specifically do not want to be found. He was discovered in a tent in the Sonoran Desert. Body camera footage later released by the Imperial County Sheriff's Office captured his arrest. He was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of concealment of death. He was returned to North Carolina in early April and processed into the Mecklenburg County Jail. At his first court appearance, a judge denied bond, describing Taylor as a tremendous danger to the public. The autopsy findings made public in August 2024 through court records obtained by Law and Crime established the specific cause of death for each victim, and this channel will state those findings factually and without elaboration beyond what the official medical record confirms, in keeping with the respect every child victim on this channel is owed. Toxicology testing on Markayla Johnson's liver revealed a very high level of fentanyl, along with the presence of naloxone, the medication used to reverse opioid overdoses. Markayla Johnson, 7 months old, was found to have fentanyl and cocaine in his system, with fentanyl determined to be the cause of death and cocaine listed as a contributing factor. He also had melatonin and an over-the-counter antihistamine in his system, substances the medical examiner's notes indicate may have contributed to his death as well. Fentanyl was also found in 4-year-old Miracle Johnson's blood. The autopsy additionally documented small bruises around her mouth and jaw, injuries the report describes as consistent with the kind of marks made when an adult hand grabs tightly or squeezes. This channel will not elaborate further on the physical details surrounding how each child's body was found or positioned. What matters, for the purposes of understanding this case and honoring these children, is this. A 4-year-old girl and a 7-month-old boy, both described by the medical examiner as appearing healthy at the time of their deaths in every other respect, had fentanyl in their bodies. Neither child had any legitimate reason to be exposed to that substance. The presence of naloxone in Markayla's system suggests that someone, at some point, attempted to reverse an overdose, though the full context of when and why that medication was administered is not detailed in the available public record. One reporter at the press conference following these discoveries asked Chief Jennings directly whether Taylor may have killed Markayla and then her children to eliminate them as witnesses. The chief did not confirm a motive. Investigators have not released one publicly as of the most recent available reporting. What the evidence does establish, through the documented timeline, the toxicology results, and the physical findings at the scene, is a sequence of events that the prosecution will present to a jury, and that a jury will ultimately have to weigh against whatever defense Benjamin Taylor's legal team presents on his behalf. Taylor's case has moved slowly through the Mecklenburg County court system. In June 2025, more than a year after the bodies were discovered, he appeared in court and rejected a plea deal, formally entering a not guilty plea to all 3 counts of first-degree murder. The case was also reportedly under consideration for the death penalty, with a hearing scheduled in August 2024 to determine whether prosecutors would pursue capital charges. As of the most recent public record available, the case remains active in the North Carolina court system. Let's talk about what this case demands we understand about the specific and agonizing position that families occupy when they have already intervened once and watched their loved one return to danger anyway. Because the instinct in hindsight is always to ask what more could have been done. Could the family have intervened a second time? Could they have recognized the changed texting patterns sooner and acted on it more aggressively? Could they have reported their concerns to police before March 3rd rather than after Markayla had already gone silent? The honest answer, grounded in the actual research on intervening in situations involving substance use disorder and intimate partner danger, is that families frequently face exactly this impossible position. They cannot force an adult relative to stay away from a dangerous partner if that relative, for reasons connected to addiction, love, or both, chooses to return. Involuntary intervention beyond a certain point becomes legally and practically impossible. Markayla Johnson was a 22-year-old adult. Her family could rescue her once, physically, by driving to Charlotte and bringing her home. They could not prevent her from getting back in a car and returning on her own decision weeks later. What changed between November 2023 and January 2024? What specific combination of circumstances drew Markayla back to Benjamin Taylor and Orchard Trace Lane is not fully detailed in the public record. What the timeline does tell us is that the danger her family had successfully extracted her from in November had not actually been resolved. It had simply been paused. And, when she returned to it in January, with both of her children, the same danger that had produced a narcotics crisis and active police involvement just months earlier was still there, now compounded by whatever had developed in the relationship during the weeks they were apart, and whatever drew her back to it. Tabby Holliday, speaking after learning Benjamin Taylor had been extradited back to North Carolina, described her own feelings with a complexity that deserves to be honored rather than simplified. She said she had a lot of mixed feelings about it. Not one feeling, mixed feelings. The release of accountability moving forward, layered against the permanent and unchangeable reality of what accountability could never undo. She said she just wanted them to throw the book at him with everything that they got. The funeral for Markayla, Miracle, and Markayla Johnson was held on April 6, 2024, at Scotts Branch High School in Summerton, South Carolina, Markayla's hometown. Hundreds of people attended. Community member Carol Tyndall, among those who came to honor the family, said something simple and complete about the 2 children who never had the chance to grow up. She said her babies loved their mom, and they loved family. That is the full and complete truth of who Miracle and Markayla Johnson were in the time they had. A 4-year-old and a 7-month-old, who loved their mother and loved their family, the way that small children love completely and without complication, before anything in the world had given them reason to understand danger or fear or loss. They will never go to school. They will never grow up. They will never know what their mother's family already knew before any of this happened, which is that they had already tried once to save her, and that trying once was not enough to save all three of them in the end. Benjamin Joseph Taylor remains in the Mecklenburg County Jail, awaiting trial on 3 counts of first-degree murder. His criminal history, spanning nearly 2 decades before he ever met Markayla Johnson, includes the kinds of charges: assault, weapons offenses, a violation of a domestic protective order, that researchers who study intimate partner and family violence consistently identify as significant risk indicators when present in a person's documented past. He had been free, despite that history, to meet a woman online, to draw her and her 2 young children into his life, and to become, according to the charges he now faces, the person responsible for ending all 3 of their lives. If your family has successfully intervened to remove a loved one from a dangerous relationship or situation involving substance use, and that person has returned to danger despite your efforts, please know that this is an extraordinarily common and painful pattern, not a reflection of any failure on your part. Sustained recovery from substance use disorder and sustained escape from coercive relationships frequently require ongoing professional support beyond what any single family intervention can provide. The Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration operates a national helpline at 1-800-662-4357, free and confidential, available 24 hours a day for individuals and families navigating these exact circumstances. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is available at 1-800-799-7233, free and confidential, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, by call, text, and chat at thehotline.org. Subscribe to the Crime Files TV. Share this video for Markayla, for Miracle, for Messiah, for a family that did everything they knew how to do once, and who are now living with the specific and permanent weight of a second chance that never came. They rescued her once, she went back, and nobody got the chance to rescue her again.